Hi, and welcome back to another new year. I hope you had a lovely holiday. Let's begin by greeting each other in this new year with peace, because we do hope it will be a peaceful year for everybody. So, peace be with you. And now, while you get yourself comfy and have a little fidget, I'm going to light our virtual candle. So, I hope you're sitting comfortably. Today, we're going to think about perseverance, keeping going, keep working at something and not being defeated. It's quite hard, isn't it? I wonder if you can spend a moment thinking of things that you find really hard. It might be out in the playground or during PE, or perhaps it might be during lesson time, or maybe it's something at home. Lots and lots of people find lots and lots of things difficult. And our story today is about someone called Paul. Now, Paul was a follower of Jesus. I've talked about him in collective worship before. And Paul wanted to tell as many people as possible about Jesus and about God's love for them. You'd think that would be a good thing and people would want to know about that, but it wasn't easy for Paul. Things kept getting in his way and going wrong. In one of his letters that we still have today in the Bible, he wrote a list of all the troubles and difficulties he'd had while he was telling people about Jesus. He said he had walked miles. And don't forget, this was before aeroplanes and trains and cars and buses. So he had walked miles and miles. He'd been tired, he'd been hungry, he'd been thirsty, and he'd been cold, and his clothes had got ragged. He looks pretty fed up there, doesn't he? But he kept going. And then he said people had thrown stones at him because they didn't want to listen to what he was saying. And he'd been beaten up with sticks. Not once. This had happened 3 times. And not only that, he'd been whipped 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But still, he didn't give up. And he'd been shipwrecked, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And he'd been stuck out in the sea, clinging to his piece of wood for a whole day and a whole night once. And all sorts of people disliked Paul and attacked him. The Jews attacked him, his own people, and the Romans attacked him. All sorts of people tried to stop him sharing his good news about Jesus. And there'd been one time in one city, everyone had got so cross with him that he had to be smuggled out of the city in a basket and lowered down outside the city walls to escape. He'd had so much trouble, but it still didn't stop him. And he'd also been thrown in prison many times just because he was telling people about Jesus. Now, you might think that that was the end of it, but no. Even being in prison didn't stop Paul. He kept persevering. He kept going. He kept working at it. And even in prison, he was telling people the good news of Jesus. It got to the point where even the Roman guards were listening to Paul. And he wrote letters. People think he probably spoke the letters and someone sat there and wrote down what he was saying. Now, that seems like a good idea in class, doesn't it? I don't think your teacher can do that for everybody. But Paul had someone to write down what he was saying, and he dictated letters. He wrote lots of letters, and we've got some of them in the Bible. And he wrote these letters to encourage the people who'd heard what he'd said about God's love for everybody, and they believed in Jesus. And he wrote these letters to encourage them, to keep them going. So even though things had got really, really difficult for Paul, with shipwrecks and beatings and stonings and people getting cross with him and being put into prison and being cold and hungry and tired and thirsty on all his long journeys, Paul wanted to encourage other people. And he wrote the messages. He said that we should keep on doing what is good. Don't get fed up of doing good, but keep on doing good. And Paul said, we can rejoice when we've got problems, not because we like the problems, but because we know that if we overcome a problem, it strengthens us and gives us hope for the future. So problems teach us things. If we persevere and work our way through them, we get stronger and we can hope for the future. And Paul said he kept his focus. He focused on what he believed was important and kept going. And so there's always some challenges for people. We all have difficulties. The past 2 years have been full of difficulties for people, but we've all worked through them together. We've found different ways of doing things. We've found a way of having collective worship on video, but it is difficult. It's not easy. Paul didn't have an easy time, and we don't always have an easy time, but Christians believe that they can ask God to help them when they have problems and difficulties and they're struggling. And so I'm going to finish our collective worship with a really short prayer. As always, if you're not sure about prayer, then you can focus on the words and use them as a reflection. Or you can turn the sound down and read the words yourself. Maybe you could put in your own thoughts. Or you can just listen to the words that I'm saying and say Amen at the end, which means I agree. So let's have a moment of prayer or reflection. Loving God, when things are difficult and hard, help us to keep going the right way, to keep trying our best, and to keep doing all the good we can. Amen. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a good week. But if you've got any challenges or difficulties, don't give up. Persevere and keep going. Peace be with you. Bye.